Oh, it's starting. You go ahead.
Hey, guess what? We're starting.
It's always awkward like this, too.
Hey, guys. Welcome back to our 4th episode. This is Drew and Jay. This is the 4th episode of Something Like Sober. We have an incredible guest, Kat, here. She has been through recovery or is in recovery and works in treatment. And we're really excited to have her here. Again, this is Drew Aston. This is my partner, Jay Spitzer.
What's good?
And welcome to Something Like Sober, everybody.
Something Like Sober.
So
here's a cool thing, too, as we were talking about. I know Kat through other people, but never have met you one-on-one.
Right.
Which is awesome, too. I mean, it's cool because I've tried to hang out with you and like Noel and Eric at the same time. It just never works out for some reason. Y'all keep doing cooler things without us. Like, for example, like different haunted houses, and we went to the opposite one. So maybe y'all are just more fun than we are, I guess. But it's cool to get to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you. Good things, of course. We have this, like I said, Eric's a good friend of mine. Noel's a good friend of yours. And you said you have like 5 years sober?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 5 years.
So has all of that time been collected here in Austin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried getting sober, I guess, right, a couple of times in New York, where I'm from originally, and nothing really, like, stuck. And then I finally came down here to go to a treatment center, and I stayed in that treatment center for a couple of months, and from then, you know, that was kind of like the start of the 5 years.
Sure. Did we go to the same treatment center? Are we from the same family of?
I think we did.
Family of programs?
We are.
Oh,
we are.
Cool. Nice. So we went to BRC. Did we go around the same time? Is that how? Because that's
Probably.
how weird how it works out. The whole funneling.
I was like summer of 2018.
Yep, that's me.
Is it really?
Yeah. I got.
Okay.
Yeah, I got out at like December of 2018.
Okay, I got out.
Eric was a little before me.
Yeah.
And I'm a Spearhead alum.
Okay, yeah.
Spearhead.
Sure.
And you went to
BRC Women.
BRC Women. So and you stayed sober the whole time.
I did.
That is fan-fucking-tastic.
Yeah.
Guess what?
You didn't.
I did not. I did not. But that's great. That's really cool. I like here was a big thing for Drew and I, and I'll even let Drew talk about this some, is we talked to a lot of dudes a lot. Part of that is because I think I've kind of funneled my recovery, and like the meetings I go to are pretty honed in now, and most of them are just, there's a lot of males there. That's just kind of what it is, like my home group type thing. So we don't get to like get out in the community very much. I'm not saying there's not strong women, because I know there are strong women, but y'all kind of keep y'all's group tight too, I feel like.
Yeah, I definitely think it's more, honestly, I think it's more sparse, or at least like what I've seen in Austin, you know. There's a lot more males in recovery than females. And I think there's a lot more like male resources in recovery when we talk about things like treatment centers and sober living. It's just like the numbers of it. Like there's so many more men's centers comparatively to like women's centers, right? So I think, you know, in turn, like in the rooms in AA, and what we see is a lot more men as well than women around, which is, you know, unfortunate. And I'm not really exactly sure what it is, right? But you know, in terms of resources available for women, like there definitely are less.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense. I mean,
No, absolutely. I mean, just in general perspective, when you look at addiction as a whole, I mean, I think that there are more men than women, which, you know, I mean, maybe I think it might be some kind of a testosterone thing, or, you know, who knows, but
it's like you got a set of those, so you're more susceptible.
You know, I mean, it very well may be, but, you know, I mean, in your perspective, Kat, I mean, you know, how has recovery been for you from a woman's standpoint?
Yeah. You know, I can't really speak too much to the comparison, as I've never experienced it from a man's standpoint, but, you know, I think recovery for me personally, and I think it's different for everyone, like I think that getting to a position to even want to be sober was like the first struggle for me, because even, you know, by the time I went to this last treatment center, I was still in a position where, you know, a life of recovery wasn't something that I really like coveted. And, you know, I think there was a lot to that. I think like a lot of it was like based out of like fear of change and relationships and just like dynamic switching and all sorts of things. But mostly I think that, once I finally got to the point where like I wanted to be sober and wanted to like have an experience with the work and did have an experience with the work. And then obviously that mindset kind of changed, like coming into like the rooms and, the first 2 years I hit the ground incredibly hard with like H&Is and home groups and service commitments and sponsees. And honestly, the most like 2-3 years, I think. And I kind of had to realize like I needed more of a balance in my life. I needed to take a step back.
Yeah.
Just because it was unsustainable, honestly. Like it was,
You'll burn
it was
out.
a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah,
I had like
yeah.
2 to 3 home groups.
Yeah.
I had like service commitments at all of them. I had like an H&I or 2 H&Is I was doing a week. I was sponsoring like 14 women. And I don't say that to be like, look at this, but it was, I was doing it because, you took away, something that provided me like a lot of relief, right? And in turn implemented something like a very healthy new way of doing it. But, much like drugs and alcohol, right? I become like super like latched and attached onto it.
That's so
and,
true.
And it becomes part of like my identity and my personality and like my ego.
becomes your way of
right?
life.
Yeah.
That's such a good point.
So I was like super enmeshed in it to a point where like it was probably unhealthy.
Yeah.
And
Kat, I'd kind of like to back up here a little bit. I'd like to let the audience know a little bit about your story as well. If like, how you kind of fell into addiction, what led up to it, what were the signs?
Yeah, hold on. Before you do that, though, this is a good topic because you just pointed out something. I think I struggle with this now too. Is like so I'll kind of my story before is I got ingrained so deeply too, to where my identity wrapped around it. And my downfall was the fact that if this whole thing is about honesty, and just in general, you can take the program away or whatever, and the whole honesty piece, I started struggling with that because my identity was wrapped around it, and I felt like I couldn't talk about my struggles because I was protecting my identity within recovery, and I was so ingrained, so ingrained with what was going on that that was my world. It wasn't like I think at first we have to. I struggle with saying that too, but at first we have to like look at it and say, okay, I've fit my life into my recovery, but there is a point, I think, that you start to fit your recovery into your life, or you stay in the same position and it is all recovery and it does become daunting, it does become heavy, constant that do you think that you can, is it possible, I should say, that you fail to grow as a person? And you just like have this cape of identity of recovery on you, and that is what and maybe I don't know if there's growth in that or not, but you don't blossom anymore as a human being, like internally without the recovery stuff.
100%. I think that was the situation for me. Like, I think it was great that I was out there and I was helping like other women trying to get sober and things like that, but there was also a point where it's like, okay, like, yeah, I do all of this, and it even talks about it in the book, right? Like when we're talking about like families and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, like I'm doing all of this, but also like I'm like neglecting my family.
Yeah.
And it's like just like an addiction when like I didn't talk to them for like, lengths of time on end, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's okay, right? Or, I think that maybe it's fine to, blow off like previous plans I had and like because I'm doing it in the sake of like recovery, right? And it's like,
Right.
well, no, I also made a commitment to someone else that I was going to be here and I should like have some integrity around that.
Yeah.
Right. So even, I for me personally, I definitely think it was what you just said, right? Like that there was all these things that I was doing in AA or DA or CA or whatever it was. But like in total, like there was so many other areas of my life that I wasn't growing in.
Yeah.
And like the whole point of AA for me, or whichever like A program, whatever it is, right, is to grow as a human being, not just like grow and like, look how well I do AA.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like a little task.
Yeah.
So, for me, I realized like that, like it wasn't effective anymore at that point.
That's
right?
the point. Yep.
So it's like, okay, so how do I implement these principles into like all of my affairs instead of
Yeah.
like just this one section?
Right.
And like,
Yeah.
being this like little like AA character
Sure,
walking
sure.
around.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think, and I think a lot of us struggle with that because it's like you dive yourself deep into this program. You're starting to work within like all these like principles and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, I'm still in the same place, and you wonder why your life starts to feel so stagnant, is because, in that, like, I mean, when you first get sober, things are happening so fast, your life is growing so fast, and things are changing. And then all of a sudden, I think it's like there is a plateau to the point of what the actual, like, program part of this will get you to. And then it's like you have to apply it to all your affairs. You have to, like, start looking. Your life has to start changing in certain patterns, or you will be in that room at your meetings, multiple meetings, over and over again, and then all of a sudden you're starting to get miserable, even though you feel like you're applying a like principle, or like you're saying, like you're starting to make commitments or make excuses to why I can't participate in the facets of life or expanding my life because I'm committed to this H&I, I'm committed to, and now like I'm giving everything to just this program. Just like all of it, and I will make excuses around it. And like you said, it's the same thing like in my addiction. I did the same thing, and now it's just moved over, and the only thing I'm not doing is putting drugs or alcohol on.
Right. And it's the same thing as like workaholic,
Yes.
right? The same thing, or like just switching vices. And like, is it better? Absolutely. And is it needed in the beginning? 100%. I think I really needed to throw myself into that. But at some point, like, it did have to change a little bit and like flow a little bit. Because if not, you're right, like that rigidity was absolutely like eating at me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. At the end of the day, you have to get to a place of a sense of normalcy. And, you know, I feel like when you're fresh out of treatment or whatever, or you're, you know, newly getting sober, it's kind of like the busiest part of your life. You know, you're trying to restore your life as it was, or trying to build yourself back up, while simultaneously you're sitting there and you're incorporating all these new things in your life, like AA meetings, H&I meetings, sponsorship roles, talking to your sponsor, you know, all these new things. And it's just all these aspects that are coming at you at once. And it's so easily, especially from an addict's mentality, to sit there and kind of super focus on one thing, like be like, okay, well, I have to dive into AA to make sure that like my life is good. And you just use that as like you hyper focus on it, you know, for a little while. And then after a while, and what I've seen so many times is people that hyper focus on the AA program, they burn out, and then they end up saying like, okay, well, I've done this for 2 years or 3 years,
Right.
and I'm done. Like, okay, like I've put my dues in, you know,
Right.
I'm good to go from now.
And I felt that, you know, I think. Sorry, I'm so thirsty. I
Drink
whisper
it up.
creepily into the mic, slurping into
No
the
worries, no
microphone.
worries. I'm right behind you.
Cut that.
We're gonna cut that
Scene,
out.
yeah. Yeah, and I think like for me, I think I've absolutely felt that and been trying to find that balance the past year or two, because let's be honest, right? I've had those thoughts in my head where it's like, you know, I've done this, like I think I'm okay not doing it for now, even though my experience shows, like you were talking about, like how I got into this, right? My experience shows like I don't do anything, and like I go back to drugs and alcohol every single time, right? But like for some reason I think it's like, well, this time is different because I've never had 5 years before, right? I can never really accumulate more than like a couple of weeks, and that was like in an enclosed setting, and even then, like I leave, or like I just like kind of like find a way to like still get loaded, right? So
Yeah.
you know, I think when we're talking about like, okay, like this idea of I need to take a step back, I think I can't tell you how many people like I know that have like done that over the past couple of years. And, you know, sometimes it looks different for everyone. Like, let's be real. Like some people are like drinking casually and it's working for them. And that's like cool. Like hats off to you, you know?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Great. Some people have like, you know, total full-blown relapses. Some people like are okay just like being dry. I don't know what it is, but I don't think I'm one of those people, right? So for me, it's like, even though I have those ideas, I still need to balance it with like the truth and like the reality, and sometimes I fall into those lulls, and sometimes I fall into that delusion. It's like, okay, like I don't need to go to my home group today, or I don't need to like answer this sponsee's call. And like luckily I have like people around me that are like, why aren't you here?
Yeah.
Get your ass to your
Where
home
are you
group,
at?
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that really like saves my ass a lot of the times, or it's like I don't need to call my sponsor. I called my sponsor. Shout out Megan. Great.
What
great
up,
woman.
Megan? What up,
yeah,
Megan?
I called my sponsor maybe like a week or two ago. I don't know when it was. And she's like, you know, like you call me quarterly, like change of season with like your ass on fire.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you want to do something different or not? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and she's like, I signed all this work. Or I signed not even all this work. She's like, I just gave you like 2 things to do. And like you're not fucking doing them.
It took you 4 months.
And she's like, it's been like, it's like last time we chatted was like spring.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, those 2 things just really seem like a lot. You know? I'm like, that's a big ass. That's a big.
Well, those 2 things had 27 different parts. So, you know, like, I mean, come
or they were super simple. And she's just like, nah.
Yeah, you know, and like my life gets too busy for it.
Yeah.
And I remember like I was just like, well, like, okay. And like I finally was like able to have enough, like, I guess like I call them like spiritual like repercussions, where it's like I feel bad enough where I finally start doing that stuff again. So I think it's like an amalgamation of like a couple of different things, right? I have like phenomenal people in my life that like hold me accountable, and they're like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, and then I have, you know, just like my own, I think like over this time I've developed like my own sense of like consciousness of like, okay, that I did not have 5 years ago of like, this is really bad and I know there's a way to change this. And like, once I've had enough, I get to do that.
Right.
Which like, unfortunately it has to get to that point, but it's also like great it does.
Dude.
It's like, okay, cool. Like now I could actually find a solution to these problems that, you know, I've had this whole time.
I do the
didn't
same
feel like
thing.
doing.
I do the same thing. It's like I have to be pushed to the, like, I have to be backed in a corner with everything. Like, it can be so deep as my addiction and using to the very end, or it can be something as simple and just life or procrastination, or until it bothers my conscience enough to do the right thing to get through it. You know, like when we talk about like the easier, softer way, it's not necessarily always easier or softer, but my mind will try to find things or to push things off to think that there's another route, or it'll just like solve itself with time, because I'm not as fucked up in the head, or I don't take like the shitty route. I'm not gonna get fucked up, you know. That's the last thing on my mind right now, is using a drug or alcohol to like solve the issues. But I'll do it with other things. Like I'll complicate my life with shit. It's just not drugs or alcohol anymore, but it's just as like it's just, it can destroy me just as bad, I think. But again,
some
like,
kind of supplement.
yeah, or whatever it is, whether it's like a badass TV show that I'm into, or like just like, I don't know, candy sometimes. I mean, I know it sounds stupid and simple, but like I like, dude, I go into this fucking zombie mode at like,
God.
I wake up at the same time at 3 a.m., right?
I've seen it.
And there's a bowl of candy there's a bowl of candy on the table, and like, he's seen it like personally, because I like stumble in there, I guess, and I just like find myself eating candy at like 3:30 in the morning, like just like it's so bad though. It's so bad, and I know he does because I've seen him on camera. I like to watch him like zombie out in there. He's like he sat down this morning and like, what did you do?
Oh God, talk about addict behavior. Like, I mean, so, you know, we have this big bowl of candy in our house, right? And, you know, I get home from work really late. And sometimes I'll get home from work late and I'll sit there and I'll, like, pick a piece of candy out of, like, the bowl. And I'll see Jay, like, come out in his boxers. And he's in zombie mode. And he's just like, get out of the way, candy. and, literally, I'll be like, hey, man, how was your day? And he'll be like, get out. And I'm just like, all right, dude, I'll give you your space. But, you know, this morning, I guess it was 2:00 in the morning, I came out and we have these like little now and laters. Yeah. Like, you know, those things where you have to pull them out of the wrapper.
Awful.
Like Jolly Rancher.
They're like glued to the
they're glued to the candy, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like half asleep, half awake. And I knew that I didn't want to carry all these now and laters to my bed and leave the wrappers in my bed. So I sat there at the table and half asleep, half awake. I'm sitting there and I unwrap in the light like 8 or 9 now and laters, and I just sit them on the table, and I'm sitting there and I'm counting my little now and laters. I have my little drug stash right there, and I put them in my hand, and I go and I walk back to my room with all these now and laters. I'm just like, Jesus Christ! I woke up this morning and I was like, who are you?
What am I doing with my life?
Like what is going on? Like,
honestly,
Jesus Christ!
I think everyone has that. You know, I think like one thing that like I've always had like an issue with, but especially like flaring up, like for y'all, it may be like shopping.
Oh,
right?
sure.
Like that's like the biggest like downfall. And I was in sober living, and I had this sober coach who's phenomenal. She's great, but I remember I spent like my whole paycheck at Neiman's or like on like one pair of sunglasses.
Yeah.
And she's like, you got to return that. And I was like,
Nope.
no, it was at Nordstrom's. It was at Nordstrom's in the Domain. I bought it because I remember she's like, you got to return it. I was like, just for the fact of like my ego could not handle me going back in the store and being like, I can't.
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't owe them an explanation. They weren't going to like ask, like,
Yeah.
like insinuate this chick's in sober living.
Oh, do you not have enough money for these?
Yes.
We're not going to ask that. Like,
and I remember I had to drive all the way down, and finally, like when I like didn't have anything to fucking eat, I like drove all the way down to in like rush hour traffic from North Austin all the way to like South Austin, the one in Barton Creek.
Yeah.
I remember it was in Nordstrom's because I had to go to the opposite location and return them there.
So that you didn't want them to see? Oh, wow. Yeah, that's funny.
I was like, I can't fucking do this.
That's... She went to the opposite side of town.
I can't fucking do this. It's rough. Like, shopping's rough for me. Like, this guy asked me out on a date, and like we went out a couple different times, and he's like, let's go to the vintage shops over in like North Loop.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
oh boy.
Like, sure. And I go,
okay.
Like my eyes like roll back into my head. I go absolutely apeshit.
That's what I'm saying.
Like it's like the candy. And I was like, oh my God, what about this? What about this? What about this? And he's like, they look exactly the same. I was like, I'll get both of them. And like I'm just going like absolutely nuts. He's like, I don't think I could do this.
Oh,
didn't even call me back the next day. He's like, I don't think I can do this.
Like, yeah, this ain't gonna work out.
I don't know if it was because of the shopping, but in my head I was like, it might be because of like my psychotic tendencies around it.
You just took a power trip on there and we're just
dude, it was going nuts.
So funny though.
He was just
so
like
true.
Oh. He's like, I should. He's like, I shouldn't have.
He's like,
I made a horrible
he's
mistake.
like, yeah. He's like, I shouldn't have brought this chick here.
He's like, yeah, you're a really good person. He didn't even say that.
He's like, it's not you.
It's not you. It's me. It's totally me.
I'm like the bigger fan of like, it's not me. It's you.
Yeah. That's funny. That's cool. That's just wild. It's like, I think it's of course, like we talk about it, the drugs and alcohol were just what is it? They're just a symptom of the problem, right? And so, not saying that like shopping or like the things candy is like a huge issue, but it's kind of funny how I like to always like look at myself to see, okay, I know I have this like disease. If I'm like true to myself, I know what'll happen every single time. I'm not the type either that can drink every now and then. I tried it, obviously. I've tried that. I'm not the type that I think I'm going to just be dry or outgrow this. I have a problem, you know? Like, I end up being dumpster, like, of the bottom of the barrel type addict every time. There's, like, that's just what my story says, and I thought I would outgrow it or anything like that. But so I always like to look at myself and be like, where has my disease manifested itself in? Because it'll always show up in, like, one form or another. And, like I said, whether that's candy or mine is, like, working out. I have to really look at ego stuff a lot. It's like where can my ego get an edge on things? And for a lot of time, I have like body image issues, huge issues. Yeah. Like I look in the mirror and I see something totally different than everybody else. I can wake up one day in the morning and be like, dude, I've lost 20 pounds of muscle mass. Like this is not good. And I freak out. Like I literally have like a meltdown in my head. Like what's going on? What's going wrong? And so like a lot of my stuff has manifested in that, and I like have to balance out what's the healthy part of this and what's not, because I'll tell everybody and have a hard conversation like this is for my mental health. And the truth is like I am an aesthetics person. I want to look good. I need people to see me looking good. Like that's the truth. It's like because another point was anytime guys hate this. You're like, dude, you look like you've lost some weight. If you tell me that.
Oh, it's over.
Run through that wall to like
we're not friends anymore.
Yeah. And it's just funny how that's worked, because I don't know, if I'm telling someone like, man, I really am lifting weights for my mental health. It's just my personal time to put my headphones in and just zone out of the world. That's a good answer. Sounds good. But the truth is like, I need that shoulder to look like
fuck yeah.
Just an aesthetic, yeah.
Right?
Totally.
You know what I mean? Or
I don't run because I love running.
It's
like the best bang for your buck. Like
right.
You burn the most calories and like it'll
It's weird because it's like they're like, man, someone will be like, man, I'm so strong, I deadlifted. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like I do this for aesthetics, honestly. In my head, I'm telling that. It's just weird. Is there anything in your life that can you relate to that with anything? Is it running or is it like?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like working out. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I do think like exercise does provide like great
Endorphins.
stress relief. Yeah, and endorphins, and it has helped my mental health. But like, to be really, like, I only got into it because like I wanted to be thinner.
Yeah.
Like that was it, right? Like, and I want to like look better. And even with shopping, like I buy this stuff because like I want to be like seen, like the newest and like latest and hip, right? And like people will like curate this sort of like thought of you or image of you in your head, like based on like how you look, right? So yeah, absolutely. I think there's tons of that going on, you know, in multiple aspects of my life. Like sometimes it's working out and you're right, pieces of me like truly do love like clothing and like silhouettes and proportions and like, you know, everything about it. And then pieces of me truly do love like working out and providing like endorphins and you know, for what it does for you. But then like there's this other piece of me, it's like, okay, I'm doing this for reasons of ego, like basically what you were saying.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's like kind of separating it.
It's hard.
And it's super hard.
Yeah.
You know?
So let me jump in on that real quick. Cause you know, I heard you mention, you know, you work out because you want to look good. You wear clothes because they make you look good. Mm-hmm. Do you think that part of your addiction or part of the things that drove you to your addiction were something along the lines of you supplementing that void, maybe like, you know, making complimenting your ego, complimenting your self-confidence?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think it's talked about a lot. But yeah, the gong.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's talked about a lot, you know, in like early recovery and things like that. It's like we use because like, you know, it like made us less self-conscious, or like we drank because like it made us more confident and outgoing, and 100%, right? I think, you know, for me, and when I started like getting into using, I remember like I was young. I was maybe like 13 when I started like normally using, and like 15 on like an everyday basis. Yeah. Right? And you know, I think it was, yes, like it provided relief and like, you know, like fun at that point, I guess, right? And it was at that point. But like also a piece of it did give me something, right? Like I didn't feel so alone. I didn't feel like I was like carrying the weight of like, you know, all these things like in the past, right? Whether it was like issues with my family or like issues with like my mother, or, you know, friendship relationships, were like navigating that, and like, you know, early teenage years, and like relationships with guys and navigating that, and like it was a lot, right? So it provided relief from that sort of stuff, but it also like it gave me something, right? Like and I even like remember like saying this, similar things like this, like when I was like a kid, and like not knowing like how it all connected, but I was like I don't think like drinking does the same thing for me as it does for y'all, like in high school, because I'm like, why wouldn't you like do it all, like why aren't you doing it all the time? That, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And when they were like, like why are you like fucked up like third period math class, I'm like
why are you not, you know?
But it's like, what, it reeks like vodka, cat, like close your water bottle.
Like it's a Tuesday and we have class.
They're like, it's freshman year home period, like let's chill. And you know, it was like, I remember I was like, it doesn't do the same thing for you that it does for me. Yeah. Right. Or else like you'd be doing it like all the time. Like it's great. It's phenomenal. Right. Yeah. And I remember I feel the most me when I'm under the influence. Like I remember like saying things like that. Like, you know, it's like there's, you know, me like sober. Right. And, you know, just kind of like what I call like autopiloting through life, just like waiting to like get high or like get, you know, drunk or whatever it was. And, you know, then when I like finally put the substance in my body, I was like, okay, like now I
finally like, I'm here.
Right,
I'm back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm back.
Right. And I can't really like remember like the exact phrasing, but I remember like saying stuff like that and like along those lines. And it's funny, it's like I look back and it's like, okay, we're talking about that stuff now, right? And when we get into recovery, it's like we, you know, use it because it provided something from us, right? It filled some piece of us.
Absolutely.
So this is the big question that everybody struggling wants to know is that how did you get past that? Once you got sober, you know, obviously, you know,
awful.
Getting sober, I mean, doesn't
Getting sober was awful.
It's terrible.
It doesn't fix all those
the
problems
first
that were
part
in
of
the
that
past.
shit is so.
you were
fucking
using
overwhelming.
as a supplement to numb out all those problems.
Yeah.
How did you get above that?
Yeah. And I'm really serious when I say like getting sober was awful. Like it was great. It was the best decision I've ever made. But like it was like super painful.
Yeah.
Right? So I remember like even like going into treatment and like not wanting to talk to anyone. Or like getting out of treatment and like we'd be at like those really big like social meetings, right? Like there was like late night CA and late night HA at like Galano and Club 101.
I remember
And-
Galano. Is Galano still popping?
I don't know. I
I
haven't
don't
been there
either,
in a
dude.
while.
Sorry, I was like, I remember what you're so true.
Mm-hmm.
Thursdays at Galano was kind of like the social. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yep.
You're just taking me back. Sorry.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
And it was like I remember like literally like just like chain smoking a cigarette as fast as I can. I'd be like like let's fucking like to my ride, you know,
Yeah,
wherever I'm
yeah,
like let's go. It was really hard, right? Like, and I think in treatment it was easy because I was trapped with like these same girls for like 4 months.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you kind of like grow to know them, and then you're totally thrust into the world after that.
Completely different environment.
Yeah, with like a bunch of people and people ranging anywhere from like, 10 years to also freshly new. I'm dealing with people that aren't sober and just normal or using, or like I remember my first job was at Goodwill and like everyone was like fucked up or I was like working like the dusty warehouse in the back and everyone was just like off their rocker, just like nodding. I was like, good for you. But
Good first job.
Good
Yeah.
for them,
Yeah,
right? But it was like super uncomfortable, right? And I don't think like I dealt with it well. Like I don't know if like anyone really does. I don't know what well really looks like. It was just I had to kind of like keep putting myself in those situations to get over it, right? Similar to like this where I'm like I'm really nervous, right? Like same thing with like speaking and like AA and like telling my story and like chairing meetings. Like I didn't want to like do any of that, or like when people are like bring the topic to my I never really wanted to do that. Like I had a big fear of public speaking. Huge fear.
Number one fear of humanity, they say. For real.
More than
It's number
dying.
one.
More than
we
dying.
had to take it to graduate high school. I dropped out of the class before the first speech and finagled my way to graduate without having to do it. Like I hated it that much. They're like, you won't graduate if you don't. I'm like, I'm not doing it.
Wow.
I remember like being in rehab and they're like, everyone tells their story before they leave. And I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
let me be the first to not. I'm like, and it was
We're
like
good.
5
Fuck
people
you.
there.
Yeah,
I was
test
like,
me. See what
I'm like,
happens.
nope. But eventually, like I went to that treatment center and they like made you share and they made you tell your story. And I was like, look, all I know is like I'm not staying here a 5th month. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Did you not? Oh wait, you said
I had the 4th.
like me too.
One of my good friends got the 5th.
What?
Yeah, she pled the 5th. Yeah.
She pled the fifth, dude. I would have fucking. I don't know what I'd have done.
Anyway,
Good for her.
Yeah, good for
But-
yeah. It's so I was like, I'm all right. I'll do it, and I kind of did it hesitantly and like sweating bullets, and I just kind of realized like the more I did it, the more I got over it,
Yeah.
right? And so like now it'll still come up like a little bit, but for the most part, like I'm able to push through those things as long as I keep putting myself in that situation.
Right.
Right.
That's the thing is, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit on that of the whole, because it's fear. Yeah, I mean, like we talk about fear. That's what it is. It's like I fear of public speaking, fear of, and really, truly, it's like fear of what people will think about me.
Sure,
fear of how I'm
yeah.
gonna come across to others, and I think we like really like we don't give ourselves enough credit of like how much ability that we actually have. It's like you go through it, and then you're like, damn, it wasn't that bad. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't that bad, or
I
like
feel great afterwards.
yeah, you feel really good
I feel
afterwards.
like like
That-
the best I've ever felt.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like the whole, and I think that like that anxiety piece of that feeling is like part of the like why, because you work yourself all the way up, and then there's just like huge release afterwards. You're like, damn. Or someone comes up to you and like they're like, yeah, I really appreciate what you had to say. It's just like the cool things that you can actually that you get back, and they don't come in like material things. It's like better than that. It's the person that comes up to you, or the or whatever that is, from just being like vulnerable and walking through fear of it. And that takes place in all kinds of things in life. Most people who are successful walk through a lot of fear. They took a chance a lot of times, and sometimes we get knocked on our ass.
I mean,
about it.
that's a great point. I mean, you look at anything in life where you have to take a chance on, whether it's, a job interview, a first date, or moving into a sober house, going to treatment, or admitting your failures or whatnot, all of that, brings a lot of anxiety to the table. And we as addicts or alcoholics, I mean, we're so used to being able to numb that down with our substance that we forgot what that fear looks like. And when we first start to experience it again, we're just like, holy shit, where's our medication? Like where is our Band-Aid to be able to cover that up with? And, I think that's one of the hardest points, or one of the hardest parts of being in recovery. And I think that's one of the number one causes for so many relapses, is that there's an anxiety aspect of it. It's just like, well, dude, I spent the last 10 years of my life, drunk or, using or whatever it may be. And, I got along by covering up my anxiety with this kind of, Band-Aid or medication.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, it's like, there's the anxiety, but for me, it was, you talk about being for 10 years or whatever, drinking or using. For me, it was like, I was experiencing my like true self again for the first time, and I didn't know who that guy was.
Yeah.
And that
exactly.
was, so the uncomfortability of everything being new, it was like I had been this one person again, or that I don't recognize sitting in this chair.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, like I'm getting sober, and here comes like the actual Jay again, the guy that I like missed, and the guy that people loved and like enjoyed being around, the guy that, and so like I didn't know how to deal with that guy, and he's typically like Jay sober and Jay in the right is typically a pretty good dude, and I just didn't know how to like handle that guy who has all these different, totally different qualities of who I was in my addiction, who's like the thief who takes your time, steals from you emotionally, who like, and doesn't really, recognize that. So there's a lot of getting sober and realizing who this person is and like creating a peace. But there's also like that warm feeling to it, like, oh, there she is. Does that make any sense?
Worm?
Did I say worm?
Warm?
Warm.
I definitely
There's also that worm feeling.
There's also that worm that wiggles around in there. But it's comforting too at the same time. It's anxiety. It's a lot, and then at the same time, it's like every time you walk through, I think you're like hitting another level to yourself. Like, oh, there she is. And thank you for making me do that.
And that's really interesting that you say that, because I mean, for me, it was completely different. It was completely different.
Yeah, we're different.
Yeah, well, I know, but I'm just saying, like, people that are going through treatment have different experiences. And, for me, it was just like, when I was drunk, I didn't steal from people. I didn't, I lied to people only about my drinking, and,
You're actually an alcoholic too, I don't think you got down to like the
maybe
nuts and bolts of us heroin addicts, which I mean, that's just me. I'm the bottom. Like, and then like what? So, for example, what was your biggest thing? Like,
I think like pills. Like,
yeah, you got into hydrocodone, Percocets, opiates.
Benzos primarily.
You seem like a Xanax person. Yeah. You like the Xanax.
Yeah. But also an alcoholic, and also
did you mix them?
100%. Yeah. Also had my runs with like kind of like a bunch of different things. You know what I mean? Just like getting into. Like had like a really big like hallucinogen phase, had a really big like club drug phase, had a really big right, and like cocaine, right, and but also like whatever I could get my hands on, right, and just kind of like garbage paling it all, right, and right, all at once.
That's kind of that's where it got into.
Yeah.
Okay, so take me here. I want to know this moment. I maybe didn't have this moment, maybe you did. Where was there ever a moment, whether that's in treatment or maybe even like taken after treatment, that you came to the point where you were like, dang, like, okay, something felt very real for the first time, that this is like, not, it could be like, oh, this is what I am and this is my truth, or like, this is possible for me and I'm going to like grab a hold of this thing and I'm going to dedicate myself to this process of the recovery and whatever that looks like. And do you remember, was there a person that helped change your life? Was there a person that you sat down with? Was it a multiple different experiences with seeing other people have spiritual experiences, or was there any type of like phase to where you're like, this is what I want to do. I want my life to change and I'm going to dedicate myself to it? Are there multiple women that are involved in this, Like, what does that whole process kind of look like?
I think for me that it was definitely like a multi-step process. Similarly to like what you were talking about, I was like absolutely like terrified of being sober, right? Because it would involve like lots of change of like self, and I, like being like honest and integrous, right? And righting your wrongs and helping other and things like that I just wasn't used to for a really long time, right? Sure. And it kind of scared the shit out of me, so I didn't want to do it. And I think like just kind of over the course of time, like having little conversations with like some of the girls I went through treatment with, right? I think like that was a big part of it. I think like there was lots of good like mentors and like recovery coaches, and like my first sponsor was like a huge part of like once I got out of treatment is like really when I think I had a big experience, right? So, I think it was the women around me at the time, like in sober living, or that I went through treatment with, right? Like my recovery coach was huge at the time. My first sponsor was like an enormous help at the time. And I think like things started to change like once I started to have an experience with sponsorship, right? Like once I actually just like was pushed enough to be like, sit down, like, and do this. Yeah. Right. And like started talking to like different women and trying to like help different women. Right. Like that's when things kind of like took off. Like I always say that, like I always credit like most of my experience like to sponsorship, honestly. Like it was the biggest thing for me. And I think everyone's different, but having that experience like made everything come full circle. Yeah. Like it didn't make sense until I started sponsoring. Yeah. Right.
I agree with that.
It was definitely the piece, like if I did not do it, I don't think I'd be here and sober right now. Yeah. Right. So I think that was enormously huge. Sure. Throughout my time too.
Sure. Do you think that so the women, and I'll shift it to this too, is you work in recovery. Drew works in recovery as well. And have you been working there for quite a bit of time?
So since we first opened, okay, about a year and a half.
Yeah. Okay. And you're liking it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you always worked in recovery since you got out? Or you said Goodwill, but what got you to want to get there? I should say.
To work in recovery?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had like a bunch of like these small like odd jobs, like Goodwill, like sorting through like the clothes in like the back, which is like not good for like my like little shopping thing. I would like hide them. I would like come back for them later because we weren't allowed to buy them if it was like put out on the floor that week. So I'd like hide them in like a special spot and I'd like burrow them away. Yeah. So I did that, and they were like about to fire me, and I ended up quitting. Then I worked at Thundercloud Subs. And
You're about to fire you?
Yes. And not for that, for not trying out. It was rough going for me when I first got sober. Sure. No, it really was. Like 4 months didn't do a lot for me. Like it really didn't. I had issues. And then I went to Thundercloud Subs, and I was a sandwich artist, and I loved it. Like I loved everyone I was with. It was great. I still go back into the shop and show my face, and they're like, yeah, like they're just so nice. They're the best people ever. I worked at the one on Houston and Burnett over near the apartments. It was phenomenal. They fired me. They absolutely fired me.
Why did you get fired?
So I got fired that time because Well, that time
funny story.
I was out at South by Southwest with some people that you probably know from Spearhead, Spearhead guys, and I like slept through my entire shift. Like my shift ended at 3, and I like woke up at 2, and I was like,
one shift? They fired you for one shift? But
everyone says that. So I had food poisoning like a week before, and she's like, get someone to cover your shift, and everyone was like, can't, like, sorry, it's day of. And I was like, well, I didn't expect to get, like, I got the food poisoning day of, you know?
I didn't plan this.
Right. So I was like, I'm like, I can't come in, right? Yeah. So I think that was like the first straw. And then the second straw being South by Southwest.
Got you.
And I remember my sponsor, I met with my sponsor that day, and she was like, you need to be honest and just tell them. And I was like, so I call her, I was like, hi. I'm like, so, and I kind of like filled her in on the situation. She's like, you're fired. Yep. And I'm like,
all right then.
I'm like, that's really fair. And then Noelle and I actually went to like some different festival that day after. I remember I was sitting on the steps of my apartment, and Noelle comes up to me and she's like, what's going on? I was like, I just got fired. And she's like, oh damn, that sucks. But Mariah and I are going to like this festival if you want to come. I was like, yeah,
I'm good.
And we had a great time, and it was good. So, but
I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah.
You know?
Then I was a rowing coach down at Town Lake.
Oh,
I
you
used
did?
to row. Yeah, I used to row in high school. So I kind of like went back down to like the Texas Rowing Center down there.
Is it? Yeah. Okay.
And I did that. And then I always said like to get back to the original question. I always said I'm never gonna work in recovery. I always said two things. I was like I'd never be a therapist and I'd never work in recovery.
Oh yeah.
And I ended up doing both those
Sure
things.
shit.
Yeah.
Right.
That's cool how that
Yeah,
works out there.
you know, just because I like despise those two things so much. And then about like a year sober, honestly, I think it was like ego. They were like asking like all these people to like come back and be a tech, and I was like, why has no one asked me?
Ooh.
So I like put in my application, and they're like, sure, I guess, come on.
We'll take her.
Like,
Oh,
weren't you
shit.
just
They're
fired
like
from
actually
Thundercloud
back.
Labs?
That's what they said. We spoke to your supervisor at Thundercloud.
It wasn't good.
What's been holding your app back?
And yeah, and I actually ended up like really loving it and you know, sticking with it, and like I think like it was my first time like actually having passion for something that I did.
Yeah.
So it's like I started showing up differently.
Yeah.
Right. I like wasn't getting fired. I wasn't sleeping through my shifts. Right. And in turn like put a lot of like work and effort and like dedication into it, and you know got promoted and did all sorts of different things, and you know the rest
Does
is
it? Do
history.
you feel like the word purpose is getting brought into your life with some of it? And
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that way with like especially like career and like line of work always like I got sober at 20, right? So I was like I didn't really like have like a career or anything like that. Like I didn't finish college. I didn't, you know, like experience a lot of like work life, right? So going into you know this sort of field, it was like it was totally different for me, you know, because I always was like, well, like what am I gonna do? Well, like I don't have my degree, and like right, I kind of like spun out about it a little bit, but like I was talking about this the other week, but like I always just kind of like fall into like the best things. Like I try really hard to like exert my will in some area, and it turns into like complete shit. And finally when I just
Same.
like fall into something, you know, it's like usually the things that just kind of like fall into like my lap somehow are like the best things.
Yeah.
Like the best opportunities that I take, and
You take them and run with them.
yeah, and it ends up being like the best thing I could have done.
Yeah.
You know, so it's funny how it like kind of just unfolded that way. But yeah, absolutely. I think I was in client care for 4 years, and I think you know that was like a huge blessing in my life, and definitely gave me a lot of purpose. I'm shifted into like a different role now, but it's that's providing its purpose too, right?
Yeah.
So definitely lots of like different growth opportunities.
I think we have to have more cats out there, you know. And I'm not just saying that. We need strong women. We need stronger men too. We need strong people in this industry in general. It gets I say this all the time too. It gets muddy. It turns very corporate. I think that the general interest of the people that are trying to figure this thing out get taken advantage of a lot. And so like to have good people who are good-hearted with good intentions are hard to find. And I think eventually people start with a good idea or good intentions, and then like I say, their disease will manifest itself, whether that's in greed or money or whatever, so that people that stay the course, that are doing the things like you're doing, they're hard to come by, and their voices need to be heard more. You know,
Yeah.
and so like I appreciate you for what you do, and that's awesome, and we need more of it, you know, because it's just it's kind of, I think recovery is still in the wild west of things. There's more oversight, yes, but we don't even really know what that looks like, because we're kind of the people. If we are, what do they say? We are to help another addict or alcoholic. We are what's that word I'm looking for?
Uniquely qualified.
Uniquely qualified to do so. So we're actually the people that have to create the regulations of what it looks like, because we know best. Does that make any sense? You know? So
It's a brand new industry when you look at it, you know, in the perspective of things. I mean, you know, even 30 years ago, this kind of thing didn't exist.
Yeah.
If you were an addict or alcoholic, you were just a menace to society.
that's true.
You know, there weren't treatment centers like there are now, you know, and so it's a startup industry, and there's a lot of regulations that haven't been passed yet. There's a lot of things that, you know, we don't even know what to look for at this point. And, you know, that's one of the hard things is, you know, when someone's trying to, you know, come to terms in their life, and they're saying like, okay, whether I have to go or I need to go, you know, find a treatment center. and someone who works at a treatment center, what would your recommendation be for somebody who's, let's just say this is their first time and they're trying to find a place, they're trying to find the right place for them? I mean, what
does that look like?
What does that look like? In terms of like,
how do you know who to trust?
Do you need to make calls to multiple centers? Do you need to get recommendations? Do you need to go tour the place? But with that said, most people don't. Most people have a limited window. You've got a couple days before you got to get in somewhere.
Yeah.
This is what they call in media a call to action.
Yes.
Does that sound about right?
The window of opportunity is small and it's closing. 100%. It's closing every second.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all I can kind of speak to is what I've seen that works really well. And it's a number of different things. I don't think, there's like one way to like find the right fit. You see people go through like consultants all the time, right? And whatever it may be, like education consultants or whoever, and I do think like there are trusted and like trained professionals to like find like the best fit for you, but not everyone can afford that as well, right? So then it goes to like the option of like you're kind of having to like find this all out by yourself, and then unfortunately like insurance is going to play a part into it, right? And if you don't have like money to pay out of pocket, it's going to have to be based on insurance, and not every treatment center is going to take your insurance, right? And then that kind of narrows down the options even more so, and then it's finding the options like within those centers. And you're like you can do tours, you can look at everything online. I mean, ultimately, like you don't really like know, you're only like kind of taking them at like face value, right? And their word for it until you're actually like in there and a client. So it's hard, I think that's a hard question to answer, because there's a lot of places that'll maybe like sell you on one thing and you go and it's totally different, right? Or
so what is this? What do you think about this solution? I think that sometimes it's not necessarily the treatment centers that we have to like make better. What we do, that's my first thought initially, but I think it's the after process of like actually us that are doing it in recovery, living our lives this way, we have to get more numbers there. You know what I mean? Like the voices have to be. I think what happens is, what I see is a lot of times we start living our lives in sobriety, and we start to help people initially, and then we kind of get caught up in life, and we stop doing the thing that someone did for us to get us sober. So it's like it stays kind of quiet, and people are afraid to. The people are in the dark that you don't even know are in the dark. People, because like you're saying, they don't even know how to ask for help. They don't even know where to look or where to turn. And if they get caught in the wrong like funnel, it is a nightmare. Right. So I think creating a stronger community, right, is where you have to like really focus on. Is like, are we putting good things out in life and like outside of treatment? Because I think you can get sober anywhere. I think it helps to get sober in a good place with good people. I think
100%.
I think it gives you a much better shot.
Yeah, it does. And then like for me to be like there's not levels to this, I'd be lying, because like I remember when I first, and now there's like certain little meetings you go to, and that's what you start at first, and then you grow and you find another one, then you find one that's more like secluded, or you're more of like your type people, you know what I mean, like where you just feel comfortable. That's what I mean, when you feel comfortable sharing like your deepest things, and you know where everybody's at, and you're consistent with what you're doing. And I think we kind of like gravitate towards that and kind of attach to each other's vibes or whatnot that happen, which is cool. And then so anyways, it's like, how do we figure out to like help each part of that grow? I don't know, but I think some of it is through awareness, and like inauthentic awareness, not like let's create a badass commercial. Like I need to see Drew doing well, and I need to see Kat doing cool things, and like her life progressing in this way, and like seeing just like, because I think we are attracted to genuineness. I truly think genuineness like shines through, and when you sit next to each other and you're looking someone in the eye and you're like, that I'm here, this is truth that's coming right there. I think everyone needs a little more of that,
and even more so, moving to the past on that is, how do you really know? Like, at what point in your life did you really know, like, okay, it's time to pull the plug on this, or it's time to pull the triggers, better term. Like, what point in your life were you just like, all right, things are out of control, or were you even at that point, or like what was the motivator for you to like look at your life to seek treatment? Yeah, let's say like I have a problem, I need help.
Did your parents throw
I'm
you into
not
that?
motivated. Yeah, there
say-
was no motivation for me. Yeah, I don't like every time like I like get sober, it's like kicking and screaming. Like I don't ever want to do it because of like the stuff that I've talked about right so far of like it's uncomfortable, it's scary, it's change, it's not at like points. I mean there was definitely points where I was like what the fuck, like I need to stop, right? And like this is like maybe getting a little out of hand, right? But I think maybe but you know I think for the most part like when it comes to like getting sober like I talked about, like I did not want to get sober, right, for a long time. I think I wanted like certain consequences to stop and for like my life to like stop going in like a downward trajectory and to change those things 100%. I never really equated that with being sober for some reason. So it was, you know, for me it was just kind of I was okay being stuck in this like repetitious cycle of like wanting something different but doing nothing different, and you know in turn everything gets worse.
Right.
And you know, so I think thankfully my parents like cared enough to be like, you're going to fucking treatment, right? And like have some like interventions and you know some boundaries and actually like stop enabling me, right?
That's a big one.
Yeah. You know, it's like, you're not living here. You're not, you know,
Firm.
like, get out of our house. Like, we'll call the cops, like, get off our, like, phone plan and our money, right? And, like, all that stuff, you know? And, it didn't always, like, get me sober right away, right? But, like, usually, like, I don't know, like I run out of substances, I run out of money, and like I go to treatment. Yeah. Right? Because
that's what
like
happens.
You got nowhere else to go.
That's the cycle of itself.
That's it.
Yeah.
So it got me enough to like get me in the door, even if I didn't stay sober there. I think they all kind of like served their purpose, right? And like provided me something, even if I didn't stay sober after it, right?
So how long did it take before you really kind of caught on to the fact where you're just like, all right, this is how I need to live my life? Or like how long did it take before you hit that realization? Or like, you know, that as Jay kind of touched on earlier, that kind of, you know, spiritual shift, or, you know, what was it that really, you know, made you make that jump?
I mean, I do think it was like after I got out of treatment this last time, right? Or like around like 5 months and started actually like helping people and giving back, like sponsoring, right? Like that really made things like click and connect with me. So I think it took a while, right? Well, like most people in 4 months could have like a great experience in that secluded time. It's not that I didn't. Like I said, I've gained a lot. I gained a whole lot from it. But I think the biggest thing for me is once I got out and I had an experience like outside of a treatment setting.
Yeah.
So Jay and I know what treatment's like for guys, but tell us a little bit what treatment's like for girls.
Yeah.
Dude, okay, let me guess real quick before you answer. Because, like, I've heard, you know, of course, like you patch stories.
We've heard war stories.
I heard it gets wild. And I don't mean like, I'm just like, it's just a whole, it's a whole nother thing, you know?
It's completely different.
Because like, you know, I could be wrong, and I don't let me like project on anything that's wrong, but like women typically are more emotional. I'm an emotional dude, period. Yeah. Like I am. Dude, I'll, you know, you could say something that like hits my heart sideways and I'll just be bawling. That's just how I am, especially if it's, I'm an emotional person. Yeah. But like, you know, you have steel on steels, like the men's steel on steels are pretty scary typically. Where I was, it was like, I felt like I was in the military, scared to death. And like then I hear like, oh, at BRC, it's such a like emotional, like everyone's just, you know, rallies around each other thing. So I don't know. Maybe he's kind of touched on. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I don't I don't know what it's like. I mean, I hear stories from guys, right? But, for women, I mean, at least like in my experience, this last time was the only time I went to a women's only treatment center, right? So it was you know, I don't really know. I don't really know. I do think it was emotional for a lot of people. Yeah. I'm like very void of emotions. I unfortunately, that's just not my strong suit. Sure. And especially when I got sober, I was like totally void of emotion. So for me, like I wasn't super emotional. Not to say that like things can't like not to say like I don't have emotion,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But especially back then, like like emotional intelligence and emotional maturity was like very hard to come by for me. So, but I do think that for a lot of women, like, yeah, it was an emotional experience. I don't think it was like flowing, hormones all the time, just like crying and weeping.
Right.
And,
this was like,
no, I think,
yo, this is a shit show, dude. No, I'm just kidding.
I think everyone had, their moments that kind of like hit them hard.
Yeah.
And like, including myself, and like have gotten like emotional over whatever it may be. But then we also like, did have like really great moments of like bonding and, just kind of like being around one another and like getting to know another woman in recovery and like forming like a genuine relationship, kind of like how you were talking about. And honestly, like I think, like I don't think it's any different from like women to men for the most part, because like what you described, like I think we experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I think it's not like a gender separate disease, right? Or a gender specific
it doesn't
disease,
discriminate.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think like the solution and how we get better, like I don't believe that's gender specific either. And I think like most, like if we like walk through your experience and walk through my experience, right? I think there would be like a lot of overlap and a lot of similarities.
I agree. Yeah, that's perfect. All right, before we get out of here, thank you. See, it goes quick.
Yeah, it's
so
done
fast.
already.
Sorry, it goes so
Painless.
fast. We are we'll cut this out. We're sponsored by Extra Gum. So if you'll just put your hand up and say, "Hey, my name's Kat. I love chewing Extra Gum." We'll cut that.
But I'm
in
not
there.
holding anything.
Yeah, no, we'll put it there in your hand. Just look at the camera.
That's so cool.
You ready?
Sure.
Go.
Hi, I'm Kat, and I hate chewing Extra Gum.
I'm just fucking with you. That was a joke. That doesn't have to happen. I'm kidding.
Well, I was gonna fuck with you around and be like,
I know.
I saw her put her hand up, and I was just sitting there, just like, oh Jesus, Jay, Jesus, for God's.
I'm fucking with you. If I made you mad,
I'm Kat, and I love chewing Extra Gum.
Yeah.
Put it in there.
Put him in it.
That
That would be kind of.
Anyway, I was like, wow, you guys got a really big sponsor, like so soon. Like Extra Gum's like big deal. Like they're.
Why am I not compensated for being here? Like, what's going on?
Oh, that's
my
great.
check, yeah.
Hey, we appreciate you coming by.
Thank
No,
you guys for
Kat,
having
thank
me
you
out.
very much. We really appreciate having you, and to all our listeners and everyone who's following us on Instagram, we really appreciate all your comments, and please give us some feedback. Any questions or anything that you may have, you can follow us at Something Like Sober, and be sure to check us out on YouTube and Spotify. So
Cool.
thank you guys so much.
See ya.